We got an update in the Don Lemon journalist case involving the Department of Justice, who seems to be hell-bent on trying to arrest him and to indict him because he was covering, along with one of his producers, a protest live streamed on his YouTube channel inside the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. A magistrate judge has rejected it. The chief judge of Minnesota, Judge Schultz, who is a right-wing conservative Bush appointee, has already filed multiple letters no less, with the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, in effect telling them that he doesn't see a case at all against Don Lemon. And now we've just passed Tuesday in Minnesota, which is a grand jury day, and yet no grand jury indictment returned against Don Lemon. Has the grand jury woken up, or has the Department of Justice decided that they're pressing a losing hand, and now they've not only stopped going after an arrest warrant, which has been reported, but they're not even trying to get the indictment? I'm Michael Popak. Let's update you about the Don Lemon story. Full disclosure, I know Don. I sat next to him at the wedding of Ben Meiselas, just to be clear. What's happening to Don could be happening to any of us. Media is under attack. Just a week or so ago, the Trump administration, Department of Justice, and FBI was raiding the home of a well-known Washington Post journalist in order to get all of her confidential information and source material and all of her computers and all of her laptops as they went on a mole hunt. Now we fast forward to Minnesota. Here are the facts. And then I'll read to you from Judge Schultz's letter to the 8th Circuit. And yes, it's unusual. Not just one letter, 2 letters. A letter in an email in which the chief judge basically exonerates Don Lemon from any criminal indictment at all. January 18th, Don Lemon, along with 6 other people, his producer and 6 other people, go to the city's church. Protesters go in. Don is filming it. Don is reporting on it. In fact, here's a clip of Don doing just that. Let's play the clip.
You know, while I agree with everybody's freedom to protest, these people have come into our house and they've interrupted our worship. If I was to break into any of their houses uninvited, I would be kicked out ultimately. It's not a good way.
They're saying that people are showing up at houses where they're citizens without due process with a battering ram into someone's private property, and there's no recourse.
This is all part of a much larger dialogue. On one side are people who watched a previous administration bring 12 million people in over the course of 4 years. This is another administration's corrective. I think I could actually be sympathetic to some of the things where there have been challenges to compassion and decency. At the same time, these are what are called targeted interventions by ICE to keep the American people safe.
If I respectfully may interject here, I've been out reporting on a lot of these, and they're not targeted. There are no warrants signed by a judge. Most of the people that they detain don't have criminal convictions or criminal records.
I'm not going to get into the weeds.
But you should know that, though. Don't you think that's part of it?
Yes, and I could also show you many opposing sides. I'm not saying it's pretty. This is a part of a much larger dialogue in which one administration caused a great deal of chaos and havoc and danger for American citizens, and another is trying to correct that.
Do you believe that? Why honestly, let me tell you, just on the facts. Yes, I am. I want to give you the facts.
No.
That's the interesting thing about this, is that they won't listen to facts.
When you pose as a journalist,
I am a journalist. Journalists give facts.
And then you start correcting me with facts and don't have...
You shouldn't hear the facts?
Of course I should
most
hear
of the
the
people
facts.
who are picked up
will
are
you
not...
give me the facts on both sides?
That is the facts on both sides.
Now, this group gets arrested for violating a statute and disrupting worship inside of this church to make a point. Why were they there? They've been told that one of the pastors or people of the cloth were also associated with the ICE crackdown in Minnesota. Don's there as a journalist. It gets before a magistrate judge, this magistrate judge named Miko in Minnesota. He reports to a federal judge. He's the magistrate judge on issues like this. And they bring in these 8 criminal complaints, apparently one that had Don Lemon's name on it, according to reporting. Now, they don't have an indictment, so they got to use a criminal complaint, which is the kind of the placeholder for a potential future indictment if they can get it. And in order, they got to have a magistrate approve the criminal complaint based on the affidavits and evidence submitted to him, a neutral, impartial federal judge working under an Article 3 judge. And if he agrees, then great. If he doesn't agree, then the criminal complaint is quashed and there's no arrest warrant that's issued. Well, for 3 out of the 8, Magistrate Judge Miko approved of the criminal complaint, issued the arrest warrants, and they arrested 3 protesters. He refused to do it for the journalist, Don Lemon, and his producer. Well, the Department of Justice didn't like that. So Pam Bondi had her DOJ ask for a federal Article 3 judge, district court judge, to look at the issue and override the magistrate, which according to Chief Judge Schultz has never been done in the history of the Eighth Circuit. Unprecedented, right, is one of his words. Unheard of was another. So they do that. Gets randomly assigned to Judge Schultz. They don't like how slow Judge Schultz is ruling. He says he needs several days to rule on it. They go to the Eighth Circuit. The Eighth Circuit rejects Pam Bondi's application for a writ of mandamus, compelling the judge to approve of the criminal complaint. And they ask the judge to submit his views to the appellate panel. So now we have this very unusual letter, which I'm going to read to you, which in fact, he exonerates Don Lemon and tells the Department of Justice, you got the evidence? Then bring it back with an affidavit or go get an indictment. Now that grand jury already came and went on Tuesday. No indictment. Let me read to you from Judge Schultz. Now, Judge Schultz also in the news because he entered an order yesterday in another case in which he threatened to find the acting ICE director in contempt at a hearing this Friday if they didn't release somebody who had been illegally continued to be detained without bail, right? Without a bail hearing or bond hearing. So he was about to throw this guy Todd Lyons in jail for contempt on Friday if the guy wasn't released. Same Judge Schultz. He doesn't need this. He's a rock-ribbed conservative Federalist Society member Republican. Now, here's what he wrote to Chief Judge Culleton of the Eighth Circuit. He said, I'm working from home today. He has a special needs child, and he was caring for that child. He said that he got a notice from the court, Eighth Circuit, that the chief judge is invited to file a response, that's Schultz, at his discretion to the petition for writ of mandamus. In other words, they're asking the judge to comment about the writ of mandamus. And the judge says the following, this is the first I've heard of the petition. The United States did not have the courtesy to tell me that they would be filing such a petition, nor did they serve it on me. I can't access the case. The case is sealed, apparently, even from me. So I've been given about 2.5 hours to respond to a mandamus petition that I've not read and cannot read. Apparently, I'm supposed to guess what the petition is about and guess what the mandamus petition says and then respond. I will do so. He goes through what happened on the evening of Tuesday, January 20th, when 8 arrest warrants were presented to Magistrate Judge Douglas Micco in connection with the disruption of a religious service on Sunday, January 18th at City Church. Micco found 3, that there was probable cause to issue warrants with respect to 3, but did not with respect to 5. Here's where he exonerates Don. He says, as the department sees it, if I do not issue warrants for 5 additional suspects, copycats will invade churches and disrupt religious services. And that is where things stand. The 5 people whom the government seeks to arrest are accused of entering a church, and the worst behavior alleged about any of them is yelling horrible things at the members of the church. None committed any acts of violence. The leaders of the group have been arrested, and their arrests have received widespread publicity. He goes further to describe Don in a second email he sends to the Eighth Circuit. He said in the second email, the government lumps all protesters together and says things that are true of some, but not of all of them. 2 of the 5 protesters were not protesters at all. Instead, they were a journalist and his producer. There's no evidence that those 2 engaged in any criminal behavior or conspired to do so. And he said, if you're really concerned, government, about protecting the city's church, then protect the city's church and use some of your thousands of people that have been flooded into our city and use them at the church. Now, he also tells the Eighth Circuit about this unheard of, this unprecedented attempt to have a district court judge override a magistrate judge on warrants, on arrest warrants. And he basically tells the Department of Justice, if you have the evidence, then present it again with an additional affidavit or go to a grand jury. Now, there were a number of grand juries just last week. There was a grand jury yesterday, and yet no Don Lemon indictment. I think it's very hard to have that indictment, even if it was obtained, to be sustained by a magistrate, by a federal judge, and it could end up in front of Judge Schultz if he has already declared that they are not guilty and that no crimes have been committed. But this is that Department of Justice. We're watching the complete public embarrassment of 2 major leaders of the Trump administration in the last couple of days. Pam Bondi, who gets slapped back by the Eighth Circuit about this particular case, and Don Lemon, telling her there is no way we are going to issue a mandamus to force Judge Schultz to override a magistrate judge. Go get an indictment. And then you got Kristi Noem, who's been completely sidelined by Donald Trump, publicly humiliated. You know, her Greg Bovino gets taken out of Minnesota as Border Patrol. Donald Trump sends Tom Homan in and says Tom Homan's going to directly report to him. Noam is nowhere to be found anymore about what's going on in Minnesota, including the handling of Alex Pretty's murder, which again, the Department of Justice has announced they're not going to be conducting a civil rights violation investigation, criminal investigation about what happened. They're going to let Homeland Security do the investigation of their own people. Outrageous. Now you know why Kristi Noem is this close to getting impeached. We're just 2 Republican votes away from having her get impeached. And so even though you see Donald Trump saying, oh, no, she's doing great, I wouldn't fire her. You wait. Don't be surprised if she becomes the ambassador to Greenland or Iceland or Liberia or somewhere in the not too distant future. I'm Michael Popak. I'm glad you're here on Wednesday on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. Help us over on Legal AF Substack as well. Till my next report, I'm Michael. I'm Michael Popak, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now building a what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popak Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popak Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm, organically building on my Legal AF work, just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment, or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popak Firm today at 1-877-POPAK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopakfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popak Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.